already started picking on this fine sir, but I'm excited to introduce you to Dima. So just some housekeeping. If you guys can, let's try to keep our phones on silent or vibrate if we can do. Is Dima's open to pictures being taken?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Awesome, yeah. So you guys can take pictures. Just want to make sure nothing's like secretive or whatever.
No.
Back here. You'd be surprised in the past sometimes you get someone up here, especially say from the agency or the NSA, and they're like, yeah, take a picture, you can disappear. Like, no, take pictures. Still wants to be safe. So just want you guys to know this is an awesome opportunity. Dima's going to be taking questions from you, any and all things, even weird questions if need be.
Let's get super personal.
Yeah, let's get in there. Let's dig in, especially if it's being recorded, so that we can have other witnesses as well, right? So wonderful, you guys. Without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Dima Goryainov.
Cool. So I don't have like speaking slides. I'm just gonna I have like some work that I picked out that I'll just have it kind of sliding through. It's kind of self-indulgent, but I think it's going to kind of facilitate questions and stuff, just so that for anyone not familiar with like what I worked on and what I do. So it's not specific. It's not for like specific like talking points. It's just if you want to ask about it or something like that, like it'll just be there. So.
I do have a question for you, Dima. Yep. And I'll point out questions, or you can grab people too. If you guys want to just raise your hand as we go through, by all means, just like, I have a question, just so we're not talking over each other. First question for you, Dima. So some of us here know, just in case, when did you graduate?
I think April of 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And the degree that you graduated from, again?
Digital media.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then lastly, where do you currently work now? Because I know we see a couple of things, but who's your employer?
I work at Bungie on Destiny, or Bungie, as I like to call it. Yeah. So before that, I was working at Microsoft for like almost 3 years, 2.5 years, working on Forza 5 and 6. So this is all some of the more recent work for FM6. So all these first ones are from Forza, and then the last like 10, I think, are just my personal work that's quite different from this. But yeah, so questions?
Fine, start in front.
Yeah.
How was your transition from attending here to going into the game industry?
So as soon as I graduated here, I kind of thought that I was going to be living in LA or something, just because that's where most of the work was going to be, most of the studios. So I immediately moved to like Central California, because that's where my parents were. So for 8 months, I was just freelancing, and I was just kind of like carpet bombing studios with emails and like my work and stuff. And then I would go to like San Francisco and LA just to kind of try and knock on doors, basically. And then, so I was building my freelance portfolio like through the 8 months, and then I went to GDC the following year. And then like on my last day there, I just met a recruiter from Microsoft, like one of the agency recruiters, and like 2 weeks later, I was in Seattle working at Turn 10. So, and then that's where I've been since. Yeah. Is that? Yeah.
And actually, just in case for many of folks that might not know, what is this now? Is this digital creation or?
Yeah, so these are all digital. I use like quite a bit of 3D, as you can tell. But yeah, it's all. I don't really do that much traditional sketching. I do it sometimes, but not like in my professional work or anything. So.
Could you maybe kind of describe some of the workflow that you use nowadays, and maybe how you got from where you started?
Yeah.
For like what you use for your pipeline.
So when I first started, I would do everything by hand. And I would just like hand paint everything. Now I pretty much always start in 3D first. So I build a 3D block in. I use SketchUp, but you can use Moto or any 3ds Max, whatever. So I'll block out the scene, and then I'll either render it out of Keyshot, just if it's like an interior scene, or if it's something like this, I'll just kind of start photo bashing and painting on top of it. All of the work for Forza, for the most part, I had the environment team provided me with like really rough kind of blockouts of the level, and I would just like paint on top of it. For these pieces, for example, we had, because this was, like all the locations in Forza are based on real life places, so we had a team of like 5 people, I think, go to Rio and just take like 3,000 photos or something like that. And then they came back, and then they basically just organized it all by like vegetation, buildings, beach, like things like that. And that's where, so I would get a 3D, like a really rough 3D base from the environment artist, and then I would just basically transfer like all the photos that they were taking into like what the track eventually became. So yeah, well yeah. Projects. So my main projects, like for actual in-house work, was Forza 5, Forza 6, and now Destiny. So I came in, I think, like 4 months after the development of Forza 5 started. So I was there for most of it, and then I was there for the entire cycle of 6. As far as freelance projects go, one of my first ones was I did like one illustration for the World of Warcraft trading card game. That was a thing, and then I worked the same company. I don't know if you guys heard. There's a game called Hex: Shards of Fate. It's like a trading card MMO thing. So that was like one of my biggest freelance projects um, that I worked on for a while. And that content actually hasn't even been released yet. Like they're still working on it. So and that was like 3 years ago. Um, and then all this past year, while I was working on Forza, I was also working on Disneyland Shanghai that they're opening. So for one of the, I can't show any of that work or talk about anything, but that was like my biggest freelance to date so far, just because it spanned an entire year. But besides that, I did a lot of work in like for like advertising companies and stuff, which tends to be like really fun because I think a lot of those companies are sort of at the forefront of cool.
Pause, please.
But anyway, a lot of those companies, like graphic design companies and companies outside of gaming, they're really pushing creativity bounds. So I like working not just in games, but in that kind of field as well. So I did a bunch of work that, like the very first thing I did for them, they had this like installation. There was a new Acer laptop coming out. So in Europe, they had this huge, like, they built a huge dolphin tank. It wasn't a real dolphin tank. They had a digital screen on it, and it would have like a dolphin swimming around that people would come up and like interact with and stuff. So I did like paintings for that to show like what a dolphin looks like, basically. And that's what, yeah. So it was a lot of stuff like that. So yeah.
One of the images you have up there is split, and it's got like just basically white with
Mhm.
types, and the other one's
Yeah.
the picture, if you will.
Yeah.
Is the bottom one what you were meaning by blocking out, and then you fill in the details? And then
Yeah,
you do that
basically,
with the
it's
front?
So that's what the blockout looked like. Usually, because I work out of SketchUp, I export out multiple layers. So like what you saw there was just like a very base, like there was no lines, there was nothing. I mainly did that just for presentation's sake, just because I thought it made a nice picture. I like it's important to me not to just have like a picture. Like most of these are just images, but most of the stuff in my portfolio has like it'll have the painting, but then it'll also have like some extra like graphic design or something like that to go with it. So for that one in particular, I just felt like the blue and white just looked cool, so I just included it in the actual presentation. But yeah, that was the block in. Yeah.
So kind of what did you do that you felt here at UAT that kind of helped prepare you the most for going into the industry?
For the honestly, and this is not like I didn't get paid to like say this stuff, but I probably wouldn't be working at Bungie if specifically if I didn't take some of the classes that I took here, and not necessarily. You could take those classes, I guess, like anywhere. It's not. I'm not saying like if you're here, you're gonna work at Bungie, but there's a lot of schools that are very focused on like churning out students that go specifically into like game art and stuff. So what happens is there's a lot of people that their work is technically like amazing. Like you look at it and it's excellent design, it's everything, but it's missing some flavor because they're all taught the same exact thing. They're taught the exact same curriculum, so they're taught their process is exactly the same. Like everyone starts with like little thumbnails and stuff, but whenever you get into the industry, you actually find out that most of the people working didn't come from those schools. They came from places where that kind of like it forced their creativity to kind of foster. So for me here, it was a graphic design program specifically. I took a few graphic design courses that introduced me to like stuff like that, which is something that not to like elevate myself above anyone or anything like that, but it's something that's just it's not very common. Like most people don't have an interest in that stuff that work in games. So I got hired at Bungie specifically because there was graphic design in my work, because to work on some features that because they're very graphically oriented. If you look at all the different factions, all the different like vendors and stuff, they have their own logos, they have their own kind of graphical language and stuff. So those companies, not just Bungie, but they're looking for people that can sort of come up with that stuff, not just create like a bunch of thumbnails and a pretty picture. So I would say that the artists that I discovered through graphic design courses here directly influenced my work, which directly like placed me at Bungie. So yeah. cool stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of software were you using to create this? Is it just the typical ZBrush, Photoshop, or are you using actual real-life textures as your resources to actually texture them?
It's a little bit of everything. I don't really use ZBrush. You can. It's nothing against that. Like I just use SketchUp just because it's like super fast for me. I can just like really quickly like for the things that I need to work on. Um, I can like I use that. That's my thumbnailing stage. Instead, like I don't go and draw thumbnails. Like I'll quickly bash like shapes together, and then I'll have like my art director, or if I'm working freelance, I'll send it off, and I'll be like, what do you think? Just composition, like size wise, like how like the shapes relate to each other and everything. And then immediately after that, like I'll find a good composition within that, like and just take a screenshot and just export out a few layers that will give me my line art and things like that, and then I'll just paint on top of it. For things like this and this, it's mostly all 3D. I just because they're interior scenes and like this stuff, and they're easy to light. Um, before going into Photoshop, I just put into Keyshot, which is a rendering software. And I just placed some very like basic textures around and kind of lit the scene, and then I went and like photoshopped it. So it's kind of different now. Working like in studio, oftentimes you're working pretty closely with 3D artists. So sometimes for like most of the Forza stuff, I got the 3D bases from them. And for some of the things like, like I don't know if anybody plays Forza 6, there's a spot called the home space, which is where your car lives when it's not on the racetrack. So for that, I actually just build the entire thing in SketchUp and then just hand it off the base to 3D artists. And when you play like the dev version, you can break the camera out and see. If you zoom out, it's like my super rudimentary. Like they left in some of the like really like basic geometry in. That's like so. And then for Destiny, it's a similar thing. Like sometimes I'll get 3D models directly, and I'll just kind of build on top of them. So yeah.
So did you handle like the PBRs and things like that for your actual renderings?
No, not really. I'm not a super technical person, so I don't sit and like really mess with. I just whatever gives me like the best visual result like at that moment, like I'll kind of
What the programs that they use here in the classes, are those actually the programs they're using in the real world? How prepared are you if you get a job to go in and they're like, we're using this program, that you at least have a passing familiarity with?
For the most part, everything, Photoshop is the industry standard, and it's the standard here. I think I felt really free to use whatever software I wanted to use to get the results that I needed. But I will say that it's not just about like what you do in classes. Like most of the stuff that you learn actually comes out what you do in like student projects or just projects for yourself. So, you might be using one software in class, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should not use like. You're totally free to basically explore and like find whatever works for you. I can tell you, like nobody cares. When I actually got into the studio, like nobody cared what software I used. I mean, Photoshop is a given because just that's the most. There's nothing like that compares. But for 3D stuff, like at Bungie, like some guys just straight up use 3ds Max, which is what they actually use to build the assets. Some guys use Moto. Like I use SketchUp. Like as long as you can sort of use programs that are somewhat compatible with each other, and they can kind of get the file. Like for example, like last week I worked on an assignment. I handed off a model, and like it just broke. Like as soon as they got into 3ds Max, like they had to like do a bunch of cleanup. But the base model was still kind of there, so they were able to kind of salvage it. So not that I want to create like extra work for people, but
So
it's what it is. Yeah.
File type of program talk in than any specific program.
Yeah, like the program doesn't matter at all. Like it's just a tool. So it's like if you're thinking of it as painting on a canvas, you're not really thinking about a particular brush or like what comes out is the most important. So that as long as the results are there, no one's gonna like get on you for not using the same software as them. Yeah.
So you mentioned student projects. When you were here, what projects did you work on? And
The first one and the biggest one I worked on was Trade Secret, which was like my first kind of foray into game concept art. That's kind of like, because actually when I first came here, I didn't know that I wanted to be a concept artist. I wanted to be a comic book penciler, and that's what I came here to do, like graphic design and like comic book illustrations. So as soon as I joined that, I started working in a team, and I started to kind of like get a feel for what it's like to like the actual not just the process of making an image, but the process of handing it off like a design and having people build it. That's that's kind of what solidified like my interest. I did like a bunch of work on other like The Afflicted, and I did just like smaller projects and stuff. But the main one was Trade Secret. Trade Secret actually, the first time it was like I think I joined in like my second or third semester, but we ended up winning GDC sponsorship, and we went. So that was I didn't even know that GDC existed. Like that was like I was like that was sort of a gateway into like this whole kind of world for me. So yeah.
Do you want to briefly explain to them, to some, but I know, sorry, what I meant to say, do you want to explain to them a little bit what GDC was, and as well
Uh,
sponsorship moment?
Yeah. So let me take a drink of water.
Yeah, you're
Out
allowed.
of this huge bottle. But yeah, hold on. Watch me. Um, yeah. So GDC it stands for Game Developers Conference, and the main reason between that and something like E3 or Gamescom is that those types of things are most like trade shows and conventions where people like cosplay and stuff like that. Whereas GDC is it's all for like business. It's really business oriented. So you go and it's just everyone who goes there is people who are already either working or they want to be working in the games industry. So it's basically a huge networking event. They have it's in downtown San Francisco. It's every March. It's like for like a week where like the game industry basically takes over downtown San Francisco for a week. It's really cool. Um, so they have like the main floor area where they have kind of like they have some like demos kind of going and people promoting their games. The place where I spent all of my time always was the career pavilion where they have like companies and they basically have real artists come in and do portfolio reviews. Um, and that was to me like I think I stood in line for like 3 hours for a lot of them, and like it's just to talk to like some of the professionals for like 10 minutes, and like it's totally worth it. And then also so that's the main event, and then they also have like parties and dinners and things like that that you can go and like network and kind of socialize with game developers. So it's like this, yeah, it's great, and I would definitely encourage like everyone to go just to kind of get a taste. Not even if you're not, even if it's like your first semester or whatever, just go and like get a taste for what it's like to sort of be in a place where, like game industry flourishes. Because even though like Phoenix, I really like living in Phoenix, but unfortunately, it's not as rich for that as like Seattle or LA or Vancouver or something like that. So when you're living there, it's kind of like it's a sort of a taste of what. If we go to GDC, it's a taste of what it's like to be kind of surrounded by the game industry. So I would go.
Oh, and then on the sponsorship piece, if you
Yeah.
don't mind, like what was that like? That moment you mentioned winning sponsorship.
Yeah.
It was Trade Secret again. Or was it The Afflicted?
Trade secret, yeah.
Okay, it was Trade Secret.
It was pretty sweet because again, that was like my first team project. So that was the first time that I actually worked in a concept art role. So um, yeah, I think like the people that I sort of worked with were some of the best people that I think were here. Yeah, it was really cool. Like it felt there was like a real sense of kind of like teamwork and camaraderie, and that's why I like working in a studio now, was because like I think working freelance is pretty fun and you kind of make your own schedule, but for me it doesn't compare to like what it's like to actually work on a team and sort of have a sense of ownership of what you're doing. So for me, Trade Secret was like the very first thing that I did that gave me that opportunity to like have that feeling. So yeah, we worked for I think like several months, and we had kind of like a vertical slice of what our game was going to be. We showed off some art, and yeah, we proved that it was worth it for UT to kind of promote it, and they sent us to GDC, and yeah, we just hung out and did portfolio reviews and stuff. Yeah, it was good. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. It kind of differs. I've heard some people say they're looking for work that they're already producing to like match the style or whatever. What I think is the better direction is to sort of do that, but add something to it that no one is producing. And that's not. I'm not saying like just. I don't think there's something that's like. There's no. To me, there's nothing that's like completely original. Like everything, you're just kind of remixing what already exists. So, to me, I think the most beneficial thing is to mix things into your work that are not related to games or film or anything like that. Like bring in influences that show that, like it's about what kind of visual library you have basically in your head whenever you're asked to do design or as a 3D artist to build upon a design. It's really important to sort of bring flavor to it and kind of make it, a unique thing. So I would say, yeah, I think the best thing would be to look at like other influences and try to kind of mix it, not directly, not always directly, but just try and like find ways, because there's a lot of artists. Like there's a lot of jobs, but there's more artists. So you wanna be like the person that sort of goes the extra kind of mile. Yeah. And you had a question?
So for a lot of the freelance work you did, did they seek you out for it, or did you seek them out?
No, I kind of begged. Well, I didn't beg, but the first thing I did was I went down the list, not just game studios, because game studios don't often hire freelancers. They hire like contractors to come on site. So it's not like sometimes they'll hire an agency that hires freelance. So it's like you're working through a third party to work in games. Um, so what I would do, like I would just go down like VFX studios, like commercial studios, get like any game studios I could find, outsourcing studios, and I think I was sending out like maybe 20 emails a week or something like that to just like companies. But all you really need is one. Like most of the time, no one's gonna say anything. Like no one's gonna respond, and that could be like kind of it kind of sucks because you're like okay, because it makes you feel like your work is not good enough. But that's not really it. Like it just comes down to like most of the time it's just budgeting and kind of they don't have time or they just don't have the need or something like that. Just won't respond. So all you need is like one person to really respond to you, and then after that it kind of branches off because you don't know where those like they might have other projects they're gonna come back to you for, or they might have like the producer that you work with, or whatever, goes to like a different company and then he still has your email. Like that's happened to me as well. So yeah, at first no one came to me. Like I just sent out like all my portfolio, and I would send out like maybe 2 sentences. Like first I used to write like cover letters, and for like that was custom for like just for like a freelance job. I'd be like, oh my god, you guys are really at the forefront of like technology and stuff. But nobody like they just want to see the link and like click it, and like if they like the word they'll so I would just be like, I'm available to work. Here's my link, and like thanks. And that's what I just started doing. So I was able to like generate a ton of emails. Um, and yeah, eventually like now it's much easier because now that you kind of once you start having some experience, then people do start kind of coming into you because yeah. So it's easy to sort of obviously like to get more clients and stuff as you kind of start working. Like it really snowballs like pretty quickly. So yeah, it's getting like that very first kind of few jobs. Yeah. So yeah.
With your freelance work, is it pretty well won? And then what's your ultimate goal? Where are you trying to work to?
So for pay, the thing about freelance is that you're your own manager, so you have to like negotiate, which sucks. Like no, I've never met an artist that was like, can't wait to talk money, and like so because it's scary because like you don't want to, especially when you're first starting out. I was really scared if I was like, can I get like $5 more, and they were like, nope, we're gonna go with somebody else, and so I would just take like whatever job, and I'd be like, just don't even pay me. So I didn't do that, but um, like you can negotiate. Yeah, the rates are. I will say that rates are really good for freelance, but then you have to pay taxes that year, and like most of that money goes away. So like you have to just be really careful about it. You can't like just spend as it comes in. So that's one thing that I would also. That's actually a really good point. Not to just sort of focus on your art, but while you're in school, focus on you know your negotiation skills and kind of your financial. Because I'm not that good with money. Like I'm not super organized. For this past freelance thing that I was doing for like a year, I was paid hourly, so I would have to keep a time log, but I don't have like an Excel sheet. I just have like a notebook, and it just has like scribbles of like I did 3 hours tonight, and I wasn't super like I probably shouldn't say, but I wasn't like counting it down to like the minute. I'll just be like, that was 3 hours, that was 4 hours or whatever. So yeah, so it can pay like it depends just on the client. If you're working for a bigger company, they will pay pretty well. Sometimes I think one of the best situations I've been in is whenever it's a company that frequently hires freelancers. So they have their own contracts in place. They have their own pay rates, so you don't really have to take care of anything. You just have to sign it. But you have to be careful because most of those companies, their contracts are made to benefit themselves, like in any case, so not really you. So some, yeah, like I knew that I wanted to be in a studio, so I didn't really like some people hire lawyers to like go over their contracts. Like some like really higher up artists. Not you shouldn't just like hire a lawyer right away because you're not gonna be able to pay them. Uh, but yeah, so to sort of the quick answer is it can pay really well as long as you're kind of able to control the money and kind of because I got hit with taxes pretty hard. I thought they were like yeah it's like $200 I think I'll pay and I think it was like 3,000 so yeah so you just have to be careful but yeah so any more questions yeah
For those studios that you found that you did freelance work for, how did you find them? Like, is there like a website that'll like have a list?
yeah like for some of them what's that yeah so game dev was the biggest one I think just because but that's not super good for it's really good for you looking for studio work so I was on game dev map like almost every day just I would just click on Seattle and I'd just be like all right I would just click every single studio and just go down the list and be like any openings yet nope any openings and I would just do that um, so back when CG Hub still existed which was like an art social media kind of website it's since like art stations sort of took over its spot right now they had job postings there so one of my freelance gigs that I got like somebody just posted like on the forum that they were looking for people and that was pretty cool um, some for the VFX studios like I remember I just found somebody posted on the forum just like a list of all the VFX houses in Los Angeles and San Francisco and I just went down the list and like some of those places they'll have like contact like this person for freelance inquiries so I'll just send them an email like so it's really good whenever it actually has their name because then you're not just being like greetings anonymous black hole so whenever you can like directly find a person's email or LinkedIn is really good too not like LinkedIn gets a lot of kind of like trash talk but it's actually super useful because if you do enough digging you can find people's emails and like email them and that's what I did so the way I got the Blizzard the World of Warcraft trading card thing is that I emailed their official channel and like submitted my work like I think like a few weeks after I graduated and they were like yeah we'll pass it to the art director and then like I just never heard back so I just found the art director on LinkedIn like his email and his account just happened to be opened so I just messaged him and I was like I want to work on the trading card game and he was like cool yeah and then like 2 days later he sent me an art test and then I did work with him so there's for freelance there's a lot of indirect ways that you can the things that you can do to kind of promote yourself yeah so yep
You just said that he sent you an art test. Is that a common thing when doing freelance work or applying for studios?
it's not sort of it's more common for 3D artists because they want to make sure that you have a knowledge of like just the basic tools because there's a lot more technical kind of aspect to that type of stuff for stuff like this I know that a lot of studios do art tests just to make sure they can match the style I personally think that they're not very useful for a concept artist because your work is already there so it's like if they want to hire you for your work then like that your website should be representative of what you do so but it's pretty common to still get stuff for freelance not so much there was only maybe like a couple like the reason I got a freelance or the art test for that particular job is because they had a very particular style but it was illustration so for concept art like they just care about how well you design so your style doesn't oh man just wipe those are the only copies of that work
Oh no.
no
Okay. Really, what? Pick on me, Dima. It could be a heart attack.
where is it I don't see it oh was it
Had to put my password in a couple of times. So, evil.
no worries
They have been plugged quite a bit. Just wanted to break up your pattern of power.
yeah that's all right yeah so that was my answer uh, yeah I would say it's safe to expect an art test if you apply somewhere for Bungie they didn't give me an official art test they were just kind of like the team was wondering if you had an example of like a gun or something so I just over the weekend I think I stayed up to like 5 in the morning like drawing guns and stuff and I sent it in so yeah
We have time for one more question. We're already at
but most of the people that get hired are people that can work well within that team. And it's also like it's really hard to get that work. And there were tons of times when I was like, I didn't give up. Like I knew that I was gonna work, but just because like it wasn't an option for me not to do it. Like I was gonna do it. But there were definitely times when I was like, it was really hard for me to even like picture myself in a studio environment. I just had like, it just seemed super far away. So I think like just having the right attitude and like keeping with it is what. But it's not only about like sort of, being headstrong to try to make it in. Like once you make it in, you sort of faced with a whole lot of other problems now that you're in. So it's just um, like success is good, but it's still a hard thing to deal with. Like it can be like really hard. So it's like how you kind of work with other people is really important. So I think sometimes it's almost secondary to how good your work is, because pretty much it's kind of common knowledge that if you had a choice between like, somebody who's like the best artist ever, but they have like a horrible attitude, they're like terrible to work with, like, and then you have somebody who's like they're pretty good, but then like they're really easy to work with. People are always gonna go with like the person who's easiest to work with. So I would say that is, and that's the importance of like working on team projects, is because you get to find out like how you work in a studio. Like you get to find out, like it's important to address your weaknesses head on. Like if you're in a game and like you realize that you're getting like defensive when somebody is critiquing your work or something like that, then like realize that that's something you have to work on and work on it. So
Seriously, Dima, we really appreciate you taking the
yeah,
time to chat
thanks
with
so
us.
much. This